You ever watch someone walk into a building they've worked for over a decade, look around at something that took years to build, and think, this is messy, let me clean that up? And they start pulling things out of the walls that turn out to be load bearing? This one is a slow motion disaster with a very calm woman standing on the outside watching it happen. Stay to the end for my take, and I want to see yours in the comments. Every Friday at 4:15, I reconciled the carriers. Not because anyone asked me to, because 14 years ago, when Great Plains Cold Distribution was running 19 trucks and losing product on every third route, I built the system that kept perishable freight moving from Kansas City to 11 states. And every Friday, I sat at my desk with a spreadsheet that had 47 tabs, one for each regional carrier contract, and I checked the numbers against the numbers. Reciprocal volume commitments. That is what held the whole network together. Every carrier agreement I negotiated had a floor, a minimum number of shipments per quarter that we guaranteed in exchange for priority routing, discounted rates, and something most people in this industry do not even think about: pre-negotiated storm rerouting clauses. If weather shuts down Interstate 70, Beeman Freight out of Topeka had a standing obligation to redirect through their secondary fleet on Route 56. If the Kansas City hub lost power, J&D Cold Storage in Wichita would absorb overflow within 4 hours because I wrote that into paragraph 9 of their service agreement 11 years ago. 47 carriers, 23 independent cold storage partners. Every single contract had my direct number in the emergency protocol section. My title was Senior Logistics Architect. What I actually was, the woman who remembered that Dawson Refrigerated out of Joplin could not handle anything over 42 feet, that the Harmon Foods account required a 17-degree variance ceiling on all inbound loads, or they rejected the entire shipment, that Central Plains Transport would flex to net 60 if you called Denise in billing before the 10th. My office sat above the loading docks. I could hear the compressors cycling through the floor. 14 years of that hum had become my baseline. The way a surgeon hears the heart monitor without listening. When the rhythm changed, I noticed. The rhythm changed in October, when the board announced they had hired a new chief operating officer, someone from outside, a consulting background. The phrase lean transformation appeared in the internal memo 3 times. I read it once, closed it, and opened my Friday spreadsheet. Tab 12, Beeman Freight. Their Q4 volume commitment was coming due. His name was Garrett Hollis, and he arrived in November wearing a vest over a dress shirt with no tie, which is what happens when a consulting firm tells you to look approachable, but no one tells you what approachable actually looks like. He had spent 9 years at a management consulting firm I will not name. His specialty was operational excellence and strategic consolidation. He had never worked in perishable logistics. He had never worked in food distribution. He had, according to his LinkedIn, driven value creation across multiple verticals. His first week, he requested a meeting with every department head. Mine lasted 11 minutes. He sat across from me in the small conference room next to the loading dock office, and I watched him flip through a printed summary of our carrier network. 47 contracts, 23 storage partnerships, 11 states. Like a man skimming a restaurant menu in a language he does not speak. Karen, he said, leaning back, I am seeing a lot of fragmentation here. 47 carriers for an $80 million operation. That is not a network. That is a patchwork. Each contract is structured around regional capacity, weather contingency, and reciprocal volume commitments with liquidated damages clauses, I said. The fragmentation is the architecture. He smiled the way people smile when they have already decided. I appreciate the granular perspective, but from a strategic lens, we are looking at consolidating to 3 national carriers. The efficiency metrics alone would justify the transition. If we drop below the quarterly volume floors on the existing contracts, we trigger liquidated damages across all 47 agreements. The exposure is north of $12 million. We will circle back on the granular details after we lock in the strategic framework, he said. He said granular twice in 11 minutes. That is how I knew. He held the holiday dinner in December at a steakhouse downtown. 60 employees, a prix fixe menu. He stood between the appetizer and the main course and gave a speech about operational excellence and right-sizing. He read bonus announcements off his phone. Every name got a number. When he reached mine, he paused. Karen Mitchell, we have made a correction here. Given the upcoming restructuring of logistics operations, your bonus has been adjusted to reflect the transitional nature of your current role. 0. He zeroed my bonus and called it a correction. Between the appetizer and the main course, the dessert had not even arrived. I cut my steak. I ate it. I did not leave early. By the time I drove home, I had already done the math on what happens when you consolidate 47 regional carriers into 3 nationals. $12 million in liquidated damages and a network built on relationships that do not transfer. But he did not ask me about the math. The meeting was January 6th. His office, 8:30 in the morning. He had a woman from Human Resources sitting in the corner with a folder. Karen, as part of our lean transformation, we are absorbing the logistics architect function into the broader operations team. Your specific role, as it exists today, is being sunset. Sunset? He sunset me like I was a software feature. I understand, I said. He paused. He had rehearsed for resistance. I could see it in the way his shoulders were set, the way the HR woman had her pen ready. You have been an incredible contributor, he said, and we want to make this transition as smooth as possible. Of course. I signed what they put in front of me. Standard separation. 30 days of severance for 14 years. I did not negotiate. I went back to my office and spent 45 minutes at my desk. I forwarded my personal contact list, every carrier rep, every cold storage manager, every emergency protocol contact, to my personal email, my contacts, my relationships. I printed nothing. I downloaded nothing that was not mine. Then I took my jacket, walked past the loading docks, and listened to the compressors one last time. They sounded fine. They would not sound fine for long. I sat in my car in the parking lot for maybe 3 minutes. The engine was running. The heat was on. I called my sister and said I had just been let go from the job I had held since I was 29. She asked if I was okay. I said I would be. I was doing the math on 47 liquidated damages clauses, and the number kept coming out the same. Look, I've said this before and I'll say it again. The people who actually hold things together never have impressive job titles. They have spreadsheets with 47 tabs that no one else can read. I need you to subscribe right now because if you do not, I'm going to have to consolidate this channel down to 3 viewers, and I've already seen how that goes. Garrett moved fast after I left. I will give him that. By mid-January, he had executed letters of intent with 3 national carriers, the kind with logos on their trucks and quarterly earnings calls. He terminated 31 of my regional contracts in the first 2 weeks. I know this because Denise from Central Plains Transport Billing called me on January 19th. She was not panicking yet. She was confused. Karen, we got a termination notice, but our contract has a reciprocal volume commitment through Q2. If Great Plains drops below the floor, the liquidated damages clause in Section 8 kicks in. Did someone over there read Section 8? I do not work there anymore, Denise. Silence. Then, oh no. That was the first call. The second came 3 days later from Rick Beeman at Beeman Freight, the Topeka carrier with the standing storm rerouting obligation on Air 70. Same question, same silence when I told him. I was reorganizing my garage when the third call came. I had pulled everything off the shelves and was sorting 14 years of accumulated tools and holiday decorations. My phone buzzed on the workbench. A former colleague from the operations floor. Karen, the Harmon food shipment got rejected. The inbound load registered a 21-degree variance. The new carrier did not know about the 17-degree ceiling. Harmon Foods was 34% of revenue. I sorted my Christmas lights into labeled bins and let the phone ring twice more before I looked at it again. By late January, the liquidated damages notices started arriving. Not all at once. That would have been manageable. They came in waves. Each terminated carrier had a different trigger date based on their quarterly commitment cycle. Garrett's team was opening envelopes every morning like an advent calendar of consequences, except each window had a 6-figure number behind it. Then the ice storm hit, January 29th, a system that parked over western Kansas for 3 days. I-70 closed from Salina to the Colorado border. In my old world, this was a phone call, trigger storm rerouting clauses in 11 contracts, redirect through 5 secondary routes, keep product moving. In Garrett's new world, 3 national carriers with centralized dispatch offered a single alternative, a 400-mile southern detour, adding 19 hours to every delivery window. Perishable freight does not survive 19 extra hours. Then came the near miss that made my stomach drop. A former colleague texted me, Garrett's assistant found your old Friday spreadsheet on the shared drive. She is asking around about what the tabs mean. I set my phone down. I stared at the garage wall. The spreadsheet had the carrier names and the volume numbers, but it did not have the context. Which clauses were negotiable, which reps to call, which routes activated under which weather conditions. That lived in my head. 14 years of Fridays. An hour later, the same colleague texted again. Never mind. She could not figure out the tab structure, and Garrett told her to focus on the national carrier transition instead. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Product rotted on loading docks in Wichita. 3 grocery chains issued formal complaints. The Harmon Foods account went to review status. which in food distribution is one step from termination. Garrett called an all-hands meeting to discuss temporary supply chain turbulence. I made soup. I watched it snow. I did not answer my phone for 2 days. The call came on February 11th, not from Garrett, not from Great Plains, from Lena Vasquez, Vice President of Supply Chain Compliance at Harmon Foods. I had worked with Lena for 9 years. Every time Harmon had a routing issue or temperature variance, they called me directly. Not the company, me. Karen, we are putting Great Plains on probationary status. We need someone who understands their network to run a compliance audit from our side. I want you. Salary was 40% above what Great Plains had paid me. The first assignment was auditing my former employer. I bought a new blazer. Navy, not black. A deliberate choice. The audit meeting was in the Great Plains conference room on the second floor, the same room where Garrett had told me 47 carriers was a patchwork. I arrived with Lena and 2 Harmon analysts. Garrett was already seated. He had aged noticeably in 5 weeks. Karen, he said, just my name, nothing after it. Mr. Hollis, I opened my laptop. Harmon Foods has documented 14 temperature variance violations, 7 missed delivery windows, and 3 complete load rejections since January 15th. We need to understand the root cause of the carrier transition failure. He started talking about strategic consolidation and transitional friction. Vapor. Thick clouds of it. Mr. Hollis, I said, specifically, are you aware that the storm rerouting provisions in your former regional contracts were not optional logistics features? They were mutual aid agreements that also served as the routing backbone for your Harmon Foods compliance guarantee. When you terminated those contracts, you did not just lose carriers. You voided the infrastructure that guaranteed Harmon's temperature and delivery standards. That was the reframe. He thought he had cut redundant vendors. He had actually dismantled the compliance architecture that kept his largest client contractually satisfied. The 47 carriers were not a patchwork. They were a machine. And Harmon Foods was the reason I had built it that way. Lena looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at the table. This was not in any briefing document, he said. It was in my Friday spreadsheet, I said. Tab 1 through 47. Within a week, Garrett's mentor, the senior partner who had recommended him to the board, reviewed the audit findings, the $8.4 million in liquidated damages, and the Harmon probationary status. He recommended Garrett's removal personally. When your own mentor fires you, there is nowhere to spin it. Garrett was terminated on February 19th. Escorted out by the same HR woman who had sat in the corner during my meeting 6 weeks earlier. She still had the folder. That was 11 months ago. I run cold chain compliance for Harmon Foods Central Division now. 16 states. I rebuilt a carrier vetting protocol from scratch. One that requires documented storm contingency provisions before any contract gets approved. Harmon's team calls it the Mitchell Standard. I did not name it that. Great Plains survived, barely. They hired a new logistics director in March who spent 4 months rebuilding the regional network I had maintained for 14 years. She called me twice for advice. I answered both times. That is the part some people will not like, that I helped. But the freight does not care about your feelings. Garrett's LinkedIn still says, open to opportunities. His last post was in April. Something about resilience and growth mindset. It has 4 likes. One of them is his mother. The compressors at Great Plains are running again. I cannot hear them from here. But I know the sound, and I know what it means when the rhythm holds. 14 years of Fridays. You cannot consolidate that. Well, here is my take. It's called a correction. That word is doing so much heavy lifting. I'm surprised it did not file for overtime. A correction. Like her 14 years of keeping freight moving across 11 states was a rounding error on his spreadsheet. And the wild part is he did not even say it in private. He announced it at a dinner he organized between courses, off his phone like he was reading a wine list. That's not management. That's a man who confused having authority with understanding what he has authority over. And then he told his assistant to stop looking at the one document that could have saved him because he didn't understand what tabs were. You cannot write that. That is just how it goes. She answered the phone when the new logistics director called twice, all of it. After all of it, was that grace or was she letting them off too easy? Drop your take in the comments because I know you are furious about it. At least half of you. Next video is on the screen. Tap it. Subscribe if you haven't. You're going to want to see the next one.